What's up, guys? Welcome back to Cars, Cost, and Technology. As you saw by the title of today's video, I finally had a chance to see the C8 Corvette in person. Feels like it's been such a long way after the years of following this car and posting videos and talking about the car. To finally see it in person, sit in it, was just an awesome experience. So I'm very thankful. Can't wait to share some of my first impressions and key takeaways with you guys. There was quite a few things that actually surprised me. I've really studied the pictures and videos of this car out online for a while now. So to see it in person and see some things that actually sort of look different that you really can't appreciate until you're up close and personal with it was a really cool experience. So we're going to talk all about that. But before we dive into it, I want to take a moment to give a huge thanks to Kevin Whitaker Chevrolet in Greenville, South Carolina for hosting the event. They actually had the mobile tour there and the car available for viewing 2 days in a row. So really cool. Definitely appreciate them taking the time and resources to have that available for everyone here in the area. All the other mobile tour events and other events where the C8s have been present and available to view have been hours away from where I live, and between my work schedule and prior commitments, just haven't been able to make it out to see the car. So to have it right here in Greenville, have it 2 days in a row, was a really cool experience. Can't thank them enough. Also want to give a huge thanks to my buddy Wayne at Kevin Whitaker for hooking me up with some time to check the car out and film it prior to the crowds arriving. It's very helpful, and I certainly do appreciate it. But definitely check Kevin Whitaker Chevrolet out. They do still have a ton of C7 Corvettes in stock. They also have C8 allocations left from what I'm told. So definitely reach out to them if you're in the market for either. I'll have all their information in the description below. But thanks again to Kevin Whitaker Chevrolet. Now, jumping back to the C8 Corvette and some of the things that really stood out to me after seeing it in person, first thing I want to mention is just how familiar the car felt right away. And what I mean by that is how similar the designs, materials, even the layout in the interior, things like that, it was very similar to my C7 Corvette. So if you own a C7 now and you're concerned that this car is completely different, like starting from scratch with a whole new brand or totally different model car, that's really not the case. It felt very at home for me as a previous Corvette owner. I really did feel like I knew this car right away. Very cool feeling to feel right at home and familiar right out of the gate. So I think a lot of previous Corvette owners are going to appreciate that. Now, obviously, there's a lot that's way different as well. So things like the proportions and the mid-engine configuration are obviously going to change the driving feel and the looks of the exterior by quite a bit. And I will say, in person, it all flows really nicely. I know that there's a lot of concern out there on whether or not the proportions look good on the car. You keep in mind, whether it's a picture or a video, camera angles can really deceive the proportions and the look of the car. In person, the car does look really wide and strong. It is slightly wider than a base model C7 Stingray, but it definitely looks more like a Grand Sport or Z06 in terms of the look in person. Maybe that's just because this was a Z51 model and it does have the front splitter on it. It's got the side rockers that come standard. It's got wider rear tires, and the car, like I said, is a couple inches wider than a C7 to begin with, or at least C7 Stingray. So really cool to see that wide, stronger stance. Definitely gives it a tougher feel to the car. And again, the proportions look great with the engine in the back. Kind of wondering if it's going to look like a Corvette anymore. It definitely does. I was kind of concerned that the hatch covering the engine, when being stretched over to cover the trunk as well, looked a little long in pictures, kind of like it was pretty evident that they had stretched it out just to cover the trunk. But in person, it flowed really nicely. All of it looks very well designed, well thought out, very clean layout. Even the Z51 spoiler, which I've been sort of on the fence about up until this point, looked really good in person. I definitely have to say that all of my reservations I had on it are pretty much gone. It's still not necessarily my favorite spoiler out there, and I would love to see the high wing spoiler or what the aftermarket spoilers will be available for this car. But the Z51 spoiler is definitely growing on me, and seeing it in person had a positive impact on that. Taillights and overall design of the rear look much better in person to me. The taillights, if you weren't looking at a C7 right there at the time and you just looked at the C8, you would almost feel like for a second those were the C7 taillights. And it's hard to explain that, but something about the way that the LED lights or the lighting runs through it, that familiar cutout shape, you almost forget that that's a completely different taillight design than was on the C7. Now when you look back at a C7, they almost look kind of flat and old versus what the C8 now in your mind almost feels like that is the C7's taillights. I don't know. I wish I could explain that better, because obviously they are quite a bit different, but they look really good in person. They look very Corvette-esque after you get used to seeing the C7. The sequential taillights or hazards are really cool as well. The squared exhaust tips, I know that's been a controversial topic. Those to me look really good with the overall design language of the rear end of the car. And when you see the rear diffuser in person, I think you'll be surprised. The carbon flash material used, it's really difficult to pick up on camera, because when you're looking at the really bright and vibrant paint and then you contrast it with this sort of black grayish metallic finish and carbon flash, the camera typically doesn't pick it up. So you're kind of losing some of the details when you see it in camera. It's either going to be way too blown out or way too dark to get the details. But in person, I love the way the rear diffuser looks. The exhaust does look well placed, being on the outer edges. Of course, I'm going to miss the quad exhaust in the center, like on the C6, C7, you know, all those different previous models with the quad exhaust in the center. That was such a signature and cool look. So definitely not saying that we're better off without that design, but I'm not opposed at all moving forward with this new design. Definitely looks good. In the interior, you'll be shocked at how many different surfaces that you touch, or even like touching the GT1 and GT2 seats. Those feel very similar to what I was used to in my C7 Corvette. The layout feels very similar. I do feel like it has a little more space, as you probably heard elsewhere. It's a very spacious car, so I don't feel like anyone's gonna struggle with being comfortable in the car. I'm a huge fan of the new fully configurable gauge cluster. Rather than having the analog gauges on the sides like the C7 did. And I'm sure you've seen that in video numerous times, but I will say, between trying to get your camera to focus past the steering wheel and with lighting issues, trying to get the color display to show up as well as it could, I couldn't really get the infotainment screen or the gauge cluster to look as good on video as they did in person because of glare, the lighting, focus issues, things like that. So just keep in mind that the color is much more vibrant and the screens look great in person. I cannot wait to start working on my screen, kind of getting it all customized for me with Z mode. Speaking of the steering wheel and Z mode and things like that, the steering wheel feels great. I love the new paddle shifters. They feel so much more premium and durable than the 7th generation paddle shifters. Those are kind of like a plastic cheap feeling where they kind of creak when you pull them. The new ones feel much more seamless and smooth, like a little more weight to the actual paddle itself. So really excited that they invested in making the paddle shifters feel better, because obviously with this car not having a manual variant, the paddle shifters are going to become very important to the feel and the engagement when you're wanting to shift your own gears and things like that. So really excited to see that the paddle shifters feel much improved. As far as the drive mode selector and the gear shift mechanism, obviously wasn't really able to use that too much because the car is off and just sitting still, but just kind of running my fingers along it, I love the feel, the layout, you know, where it was placed, all feels pretty good. We'll see how it actually feels in real world use, you know, putting it in gear with that and putting it in park, reverse, switching over to manual mode, things like that. It all felt pretty good to me, but again, I wasn't able to get that tactile feel that they talked about when actually using it in real world scenarios. So as a whole, from my experience in the interior, I'm very impressed. I wasn't really a fan of the color interior in this particular model, and it would look like it was pretty worn out just from all the people getting it out of the car, and you can't really blame the car for that. There's been thousands and thousands of people getting out of this particular car as it's been taken down the East Coast for numerous different C8 tour events, but the interior design was great. I just wasn't a fan of that particular color. We'll leave it at that. But all the carbon fiber pieces and things like that within the interior really popped, really looked good. Love the new digital rear view mirror. That looks like a huge improvement. Not only does it give you a wider range of view, so you're going to have a lot less blind spots, but it also is going to reduce some of the glares and some of the things that you get with the actual mirror versus having a digital screen. So really excited about that. And you do still have an actual mirror itself when the car is turned off and the camera is not feeding to the rear view mirror. So really cool there. Happy to see that in person. You know, there's a lot more things I could go over. I'm trying not to ramble on about just every little thing I saw in the car because, again, you really have to see it in person. I just want to touch on a few really important things. But if you do have a mobile tour event happening anywhere near you, I definitely recommend making the trip out, seeing the car in person, having a chance to sit in it, walk around it, get some pictures, some videos. It's a really cool atmosphere there. They've got some specialists on right there available to pick their brains and ask about the car. So definitely make it out if you have a chance to. I think that you won't be disappointed at all. Whether you're on the fence or not about the car, really good opportunity to be able to get some time with it and get some of your questions answered, be more comfortable with the car. But now I'm just that much more excited about my car coming. I cannot wait. I don't know how I'm going to hold off until January, February, or whenever it ends up being. But anyway, guys, I hope that you found the video helpful. I just want to talk about a few of these things that really stood out to me and share some of my experience after seeing the car in person. But I really do appreciate you watching. Look forward to talking to you in the comments below. Like I said, with everything still fresh on my mind, I'd love to get some comments and feedback right now that we can talk about. Try to answer anything that I can for you. But until next video, guys, have a great day. We'll talk to you next time.